I got my wife's phone back. This was a few years back now. At least 5 or so and not more than 10. My wife had just gotten the new iPhone, whichever one it was at the time, I don't recall. Less than a week after purchasing it, she went grocery shopping and when she got home she realized she didn't have her phone on her. Thankfully she misplaces her phone often and always immediately activates Find My Phone on new phones, so we pulled up the Find My Phone app on our iPad and saw that it was in the parking lot of the store roughly where she had parked. We assumed that she must have dropped it as she was getting into or out of the car, and so I hopped in the car to drive back to the store and grab it for her. This store is about a 5-minute drive from our house. Now, we had one of the iPads without mobile data and at the time I was unable to load the Find My Phone app on my Android phone, so she kept the iPad while I went to retrieve the phone. We did still happen to have a landline though, and as I was pulling into the parking lot of the grocery store she called me from the landline to let me know that the phone was leaving the parking lot. The next few minutes are a blur, but let's just say 5 minutes later I had returned home, grabbed the iPad, set up a hotspot on my mobile phone and was tracking it while driving down the highway following the movement of the phone. Yes, this was incredibly stupid on so many levels and in hindsight I would not do this again, but at the time my adrenaline was pumping and $800 to $1,000 or whatever it was we paid for that iPhone was a big deal to me to the point I wasn't willing to give it up easily. I should add that we tried calling the phone repeatedly but they were not answering. It was pretty clear that whoever picked up the phone was not trying to return it to its rightful owner. As I'm following this car with the app I'm at least 5 minutes or so behind it because of the head start it got and the fact that I had to go to my house to get the iPad as well. Thankfully it actually went in the direction my house was from the grocery store, so I didn't lose even more time. I see it get off the highway in a commercial area with a mall and a bunch of stores and drive to a Best Buy parking lot. I get to the parking lot 4 minutes or so after they had arrived and immediately rush in and go to the mobile desk. All of the clerks are helping people and I can see that all of the people currently being helped have phones with boxes, so clearly none of them is my wife's iPhone. I interrupt one of the workers and ask if anyone has come in asking about activating an iPhone in the last 10 minutes. He told me that no, he hadn't seen anyone. I explained to him what was going on, gave him my number and asked if someone did to please call me, which he agreed to. At this point I went back out to my car to double check on the iPad which I had left there. I look and it actually looks like the phone is in a car in the parking lot still, not actually in the building based on where the GPS was hitting. So I started doing the play a sound feature in the Find My Phone app and walking around the area of the parking lot it appeared to be in, but I couldn't hear it outside the cars. I definitely had it narrowed down to at most 4 cars and I was pretty confident it was one of 2. I should also add here that I keep one of those glass brake hammers with the blade for cutting seatbelts in each of our family cars in case of an emergency, so I'm carrying this around the parking lot with me, ready to break a window and get her phone back if I find it. Yes, again, I know this is incredibly dumb and I would have been liable for the window if I had done this despite the fact that the phone was stolen. As I'm circling this area, 2 people come out and get in one of the 4 cars and start to drive, and sure enough the phone starts moving in the Find My Phone app. Now I know where it is. I hop in my car and start following this car. I have the app on still, but don't need it because I have eyes on the car. I'm still calling the phone repeatedly and they're still not answering. I follow them for about 20 minutes as they drive first on the highway then off, returning relatively close to where the supermarket is and start going into a residential area where they eventually pull into a driveway and park either in a garage or behind the house. It was dark at this point and the houses were close together. I didn't see exactly where they parked, but I knew which driveway they had pulled into. I parked directly in front of the house. At this point my wife and I had been on the phone together and I gave her the address and said I'm going to hang up and try calling your phone again. Now, this was easily over an hour after the phone was initially taken and I must have called this phone at least 50 times by now and they weren't answering, but this time they finally did. I think they perhaps had a sinking suspicion that the car that had been behind them all the way from Best Buy to their house and parked out front might be onto them. So they answered and I told them that I have been following them. I am outside their house right now and my wife had their address as well. If they bring the phone out to me I wouldn't give any of this information to the police. My wife had already filed a police report by this time. They swore up and down on the phone that they had not intended to steal the phone and were going to return it as soon as they found out who it belonged to, and then brought it out to my car and handed it to me. It was well over an hour later when my adrenaline finally receded to a point that I wasn't shaking and my muscles were able to relax. I know it wasn't the right thing to do in the situation and I could have gotten myself severely hurt or killed, but I was in another state of mind when it happened. Wild times.